Bonjour, everyone. Welcome to Powwow Education Week 2020. My name is Riley Kucherin. I'm from Anishnaabe, and I'm a new assistant professor of design leadership at the School of Fashion. I am so excited to be with three incredible individuals for the launch of the Lesley Hampton by Scott Wabano collection. I'm joined by Lesley Hampton, Scott Wabano, and Brianna Olson Pitawanakwat. Hey, everyone.
Hey.
Wajay, good morning.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
So good.
I'm so excited because you were just wrapping up the photo shoot for this amazing collection that you're about to launch yesterday. I was like following it along on Instagram, all those BTS photos. It looked amazing. But let's start with some couple of introductions. So at the top of my Zoom screen is Scott. So why don't you introduce yourself, Scott?
Awesome. Wajay, Scott Wabano and Gasu. My name is Scott Wabano. I am from the Cree Nation of Wiscagnish in northern Quebec in the EU-Ishji region. I was born and raised in Moose Factory, Ontario, Canada, in the Moose Cree First Nation territory. I currently reside in Toronto at the moment, where I work as an Indigenous fashion stylist, as well as an up-and-coming designer, and just setting my foot in the door. And I also work with We Matter as a National Ambassador of Hope.
Amazing. Busy.
Yes.
Brianna, how about you?
Ani Minigishiga Brianna Olson Pitawanakwat Anishnaabe Mimampi Toronto and Dunjaba Anishnaabe Kwe and Dow Anikusindo Dem also Kumkung Sing and Seated First Nation Dunjaba. So hello everyone, my name is Brianna Olson Pitawanakwat. I am a member of the Kumkung and Seated First Nation, part of the larger Anishnaabe Nation, and currently reside here in Toronto. But I also call another place home, which is Edmonton, Alberta, or Amiskutchi, Waskahegan, where I have lots of adopted Cree families. So very happy to be here today. I am Anishnaabe woman and also a member of the Caribou Clan.
Amazing. Where are you joining us from today? Where are you zooming in from?
I am here in Toronto right now. I kind of wish I was on the Powwow Trail, but I am here. And I threw on my jingle dress today so I could join you all.
I mean, you might as well.
Yeah, might as well. Any chance I get.
Leslie.
Hi, my name is Lesley Hampton. I'm a member of Temagami First Nation located in Northern Ontario, and I also have ties to Akwesasne Mohawk territory. I didn't grow up in Canada or surrounded by the culture, so I use my fashion design to rediscover my roots and really learn from all of you and get to do amazing opportunities like this. I am a fashion designer, and our brand is focused on mental health awareness, body positivity, and authentic representation in fashion, film, and media. And I am also, to continue pushing that, I'm also a sign model with B&M Model Management.
Oh, amazing. I love that your brand has an ethos. It has a philosophy.
Yeah.
Not a lot of brands do.
Yeah, right from the get-go, we always wanted to have a message behind our collections, behind our runway shows, and then it leads to great collaborations like this.
Awesome. I'm super excited to learn a bit more about that journey of reclamation and that reclamation process with fashion. I think that's so interesting. But maybe I'm so curious, who is everyone wearing? That's like the classic fashion question is, who are you wearing? Scott, what are you wearing right now?
Well, I'm wearing the very first exclusive preview of the Hampton Wabano Jacket.
Stunning.
And a beautiful necklace from Indus City, my favorite jewelry line.
Amazing. I am very basic in my, I think this is like a Simon's blazer, but I'm wearing this pin, which is quite special. It is dyed porcupine quill, and my mother got it from the Thunder Bay Art Gallery close to 40 years ago now, but I think it just looks still so contemporary and stunning. So I'm in like professor mode. I'm not wearing anything fun, but this is my like little flair.
I love it.
Brianna, can you tell us about your regalia?
Absolutely. So this is a dress that that was passed along to me from the Paul family, from the Paul Band First Nation, which is a Dakota Sioux community in Alberta. And it was probably about 8 years ago on my jingle dress journey that this dress was passed along to me. What I'm also wearing is my cape that I actually made myself, beaded myself, and then the jingle earrings I made, beadwork, I beaded on my own. And then the super awesome necklace here that I have on was made by Brad Crowfoot, who is a Blackfoot artist in Alberta as well. And my otters came from the Ujiboogamoo region up in the north. And that was passed along to me from my friend Gabriel White Duck, who's another powwow dancer on the trail. But I'll give you a look at the detail on my sleeves, which is my favorite part of this dress. And it's suede detail on there. So yeah, this is one of my favorite dresses. I wear it largely for MMIW causes. So I've been invited to dance for families for several years now, following up on the work that I do within the community as a helper. So yeah, this is one of my favorite dresses because I think it represents hope and healing for our community members, and I'm always proud to wear it.
Amazing. I think we're going to talk about those healing characteristics of the jingle in particular today. But I mean, I'll start right away. What strikes me about the difference between what I'm wearing, and I have no idea where my stuff comes from. I bought it at a department store, no idea where it comes from. And what you're wearing, the provenance of it, you know exactly where it comes from, you know the families, you know the territories. I think that's so beautiful about Indigenous fashion is the family connections.
Absolutely. And that kinship that is part of the relationship. And that was what I was always taught as growing up with Cree teachings out in Alberta, was that we have a relationship to our garments, and they have a life force too that we often don't acknowledge or talk about. The kind of Western world is very caught up in this inanimate, that everything is an item or a property, whereas the recognition that our garments themselves have a spirit and they are part of that kinship system that we have, and so honoring that is really important, and I think there's a lot of values that we can take from that.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful lesson, and I feel like most of our fashion, we don't have a good relationship. Our fashion's disposable, and we don't consider our clothing to have spirit or anything like that. So that's super beautiful. Lesley, who are you wearing this morning?
I'm wearing some beadwork that my mother gifted to me during her travel, that she got during her travels in Colombia from Colombian street vendors. And then, of course, I have the two other colors that we're offering of our Hampton Wabano collaboration jacket, the copper and the gold, and Scott's wearing the silver.
Beautiful. And let's just dive right into that. How did this collaboration come to be?
Do you want to start it off? Or?
So I'll let you start talking about the red jingles and how I came to you.
Yeah, so a couple months ago, maybe back in February, I believe, January, Anishnaabe Bimismo, the jingle cone company founded by Emily McKinney, was launching her red jingle cones, and she actually sent a couple artists and designers here in Canada and the US to create artwork with the red jingles for the promotion of her launch. So Lesley actually received a bag of jingles from Emily to start a new project, and then that's when we kind of were bouncing ideas back and forth. I was working with Lesley as an intern at the time. So we decided to make the red bomber jacket. We wanted to create it to bring more awareness to all the missing Two-Spirit individuals that are kind of underrepresented in the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls cause. So we wanted to create a jacket that was going to bring more awareness to that. And luckily, I also identify as a Two-Spirit Cree, so it kind of just made sense for me and Lesley to collaborate on a project that was both dear to our hearts and for a good cause as well too. And a portion of the proceeds also went to We Matter, which is another Indigenous organization, youth-led here in Canada. And it just started from there.
Amazing. I love that. I especially love that we're supporting the Indigenous supply chain. So we're making our own product. We're using our own designers. We're supporting each other. That's so beautiful. For those of people who might not be familiar with jingles, so the jingles are the metal cones that are across the bomber. But Brianna, could you maybe talk a little bit about what jingles are and where they come from and what the significance is?
Absolutely. So within the Anishnaabe Nation, the idea of the migas, or the shell, is quite significant because we are a, water-dwelling people. So we dwell in the Great Lakes region, largely around huge bodies of water. For my community in particular, we are located on the largest freshwater island on the planet. So our community is located on an island on Lake Huron. So we have an abundance of shells that are part of our customs, that are part of our clothing, that are part of our ceremonies, many different things, and also part of our creation stories as well, if you're to look back at some of our migration stories. So when the jingle dress came about in the early 20th century, so in the early 1900s, during a very similar pandemic, the jingle dress originally would have had, from what the stories say, shells on them. And the shells would have moved together and created that beautiful rain jingle sound that you hear when the dress moves. So that we are not, we're people that move and change, and our culture is not stagnant. So what happened is that over the years, obviously we have been hugely impacted by the Indian Act and by different things that have gone on throughout the last 100 years. And part of that is that we didn't always have access to our land and territories. And in some ways we had scarcity. And I kind of think that might have factored into what the jingles became over the years for the jingle dress. And what they actually became was that people were using snuff can lids as the jingles on the jingle dress. So if you look at my dress right now, all of the jingles are actually made from round metal pieces that were bent into a cone shape, and they're from snuff can lids. So we have the new fabrication of this beautiful company that was started by Emily, where we have Indigenous people fabricating their own jingles. However, most jingle dresses that you see are actually containing snuff can lids. So that's from the chewable tobacco, and the cones are made out of that. So people would bend the cones into that shape and then just attach them to the dresses. There have been, if you were to go down to Minnesota, which is where a lot of the jingle dress teachings are held by families, you can see some really more traditional type jingle dresses there. So they have woodland style jingle dresses. They also have some dresses that are made with deer toes. So deer toes are somewhat cone shaped. They're kind of smaller. And those deer toes are attached to the dress, and they make the sound is just unbelievable. It's just beautiful. So those are the kind of things that you, I guess, learn over the years. Those are things that I've learned on the POW trail, being in relationship with other dancers, learning that history from people who carry those teachings. And yeah, so that's where we're at now. And we're in a day and age now where it's so cool because I've seen those jingles that are now fabricated, and they have, rather than having those snuff can tobacco messaging, it's although tobacco is one of our sacred medicines, we now have jingles that have teepees on them, or they have imagery that better represents who we are as Indigenous people. So
wow, Chibigwit for those teachings. I did not know that there was such a wide variety of the jingles. And I love that they either come from the land, they come from shells, they come from the deer, or Indigenous peoples have just been resourceful and doing what they can and making beautiful things out of like everyday objects. I think that says a lot about Indigenous peoples and how we adapt, I think.
Absolutely. I can see right now on my dress, like I don't have shells on my dress as the jingles, but I do, I included shells in my cape because that is one of our original items that we would use for our jingle dresses.
And then you mentioned something very, very interesting, that the jingle dress came to Indigenous peoples during a pandemic 100 years ago, which I think is odd, and the parallels are very, very interesting. A lot of people call jingle dresses healing. Could you share a bit about why that is, or how they can be healing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the jingle dress is something that came through ceremony. And as a jingle dress dancer and as somebody who is part of the powwow circle, that's something that I've been taught from the very beginning, is that we are part of that ceremony, that this is something that is very sacred to our people, that it is, a powwow is not just a gathering, it is a ceremony. And that's a teaching that I've been given from the very beginning. And the jingle dress is so unique because it's something that we as Anishnaabe people can say came from our communities, which is a real beautiful honor, I think, that we can be very proud of. The jingle dress doesn't exist anywhere else on the planet, and came specifically from Whitefish Bay and that kind of Lake of the Woods region. So the jingle dress came about during the I believe it was around 1912, the Spanish flu pandemic that took place. And again, we have to think back, like how resilient our people are. We have lived through many, like that pandemic, but also many pandemics since 1492, when a whole plethora of diseases and infections came here that had never been known to our people. So we have been, survivors since that very early time. And that pandemic in the early 1900s was no different. The Spanish flu, what the numbers were is that 1 in 5 people passed away in each family. So if you can imagine that, our families had already been heavily impacted by colonization, and then to have to survive that on top of it all. So the grief and loss within our communities at that time was quite heavy, and that it was through a dream. I won't tell the very specifics of that on Zoom, but I will say that it came through a dream, and the jingle dress was gifted to our nation as a healing for that sickness at that time. And I also think that it was a gift to heal also and lift that heaviness and that grief and loss that was carried in our hearts at that time for our community members who are passing and our family members. So so the jingle dress has been that. It is at that time cured people from the illness that they were going through, brought them strength, and also lifted that heaviness and that grief and got them through those really dark times. And today, those teachings are still held by members of that original family who that jingle dress came to in Whitefish Bay, the singers who carry those songs. There's a gentleman here in Toronto that I am very good friends with, part of the Northern, he was part of a group called Northern Wind, and he carries some of those original jingle dress songs as well. And I think we're just really, I just feel really lucky that it was so long ago, but we still have that intimate connection to those stories and to those teachings. And I think that that's another part of our culture that is so strong and beautiful, is that it's so relational, and that you are able to carry and hold those teachings and learn about them even today.
And it is just so beautiful. part of my favorite part about the powwow is the sounds and the sensory aspects of a powwow. It's the smells as soon as you get to a powwow grounds. It's the sounds, seeing everyone, and it is super, super incredible when the jingle dress dancers are going, and like it's just the sound. I can't describe it. It's like the uniformity of all these jingles going at once and all of these beautiful dancers going around the powwow grounds. Like the sound of it, it's just like the tribal drum. It's like the heartbeat. It's just, it's so energizing, I think. I'm just so fortunate to hear all of these stories, and I'm so glad that you are sharing this knowledge with us, because I did not grow up in community, and I just didn't get a lot of these teachings. We would, come to the powwow, maybe once a year, come see our family, but we always lived in urban locations. And Lesley, you mentioned that you kind of had a similar journey, so I'm wondering how you got interested in fashion, and what was your journey towards incorporating your Indigenous identity into your fashion journey?
For sure. So I started sewing when I was 4. My mom was always a quilter, so I was always around machines and fabrics and notions and all the amazing things that makes fashion what it is. And then through my high school career, I always focused on the relation between what you create and your appearance, and that relation. And then I entered university. I went to high school abroad, and then for university, I came back to Canada, and my whole adolescence was abroad. And so coming back during that time of really trying to discover who I was, I finally tried to figure out what it meant for me to be an Indigenous person. I always knew that I was a member of Temagami First Nation because my mom was able to reconnect during her mid-20s, reconnect with her natural family. So I always knew that I had that connection, but I really didn't know what it represented. So coming back and seeing all these stories on the news of how our people were represented really wanted me to discover who I was for myself, and really just discover all the beauty that our people have to offer. So as I explored fashion, I always tried to learn from people within the Indigenous community, and bring those aspects into my work and into my creations. So fast forward to this collaboration, it was really great that Scott was one of my interns at the time earlier this year. So I was teaching him everything I knew about fashion, but then at the same time, I was almost his intern for teachings and education around Two-Spirit individuals, and more cultural aspects that I hadn't grown up with. So examples like that that have happened throughout my fashion career have really kind of grounded me and helped me discover my indigeneity.
I think it's a story that resonates with a lot of people, and it often, if you're in that situation, there's a lot of like guilt and shame and maybe even embarrassment kind of wrapped up in that you don't know your culture, and you have to ask, those questions: who am I and where do I come from? But I guess, it's my opinion that as long as you are embarking on that journey with a whole bunch of humility and you're doing it very slowly and respectfully, that you shouldn't feel those feelings, because it's not our fault that we aren't connected in those ways. That's what colonization does, is it disconnects us from our land, from our kinship relations, from our communities. So I think it's just so inspiring that to youth who might be in the same boat to, just start whenever. It's never too late, and just start learning about your culture, start asking questions, reaching out to your aunties whenever you can, things like that. So beautiful. Scott, do you want to let us know about your kind of journey to fashion?
Yeah. So, it all started when I was growing up in Moose Factory. I grew up in a very isolated community, and one of my forms of escapism while living in such an isolated community was going through fashion magazines and, all the celebrity tabloid magazines. And in those magazines, I would always see the fancy red carpet parties, just the fashion industry, the fancy gowns, the fancy garments. And I just pictured myself always being within this industry. And growing up, I never seen Indigenous representation within the industry, which kind of affected, my self-esteem and feeling like my goals weren't achievable and whatnot. But as I grew up more and got into the industry and just learned more about myself, that's when I realized I wanted to change it. And I actually grew up within the powwow circle as well too. So I was a powwow dancer when I was about 3 years old. I was a hoop dancer, I was a grass dancer, and I've been taught all these teachings growing up, and I've just always been surrounded by the powwow circle. And it's just something that's always been really freeing for me. I've always felt so connected to it. I just felt happy. And as an Indigenous person and as I was growing up, that's when I started tapping into my two-spirit identity as well too. And learning more about that and learning more of the teachings that come with it and learning the ceremonial teachings as well too. And as I started growing up and becoming more older, that's when I decided I wanted to pursue my career within fashion. I didn't know what at the time, but I know I wanted to be in fashion. I just wanted to be surrounded by this beautiful industry and just have that and provide that Indigenous representation that I felt was lacking as well too. So I decided to pursue my studies here in Toronto. I was going to Humber for fashion arts and business at the time and decided to become a designer, and also interned with Lesley at the time too, and just started surrounding myself with more Indigenous fashion and learning from mentors and from peers and from friends, and just surrounding myself with people I know that I could learn from and people that we could grow together basically.
Your story also resonates. I feel like I'm a bit of Scott and a bit of Lesley. Like our stories resonate a lot because there's so many youth who grow up kind of looking at the glamour of fashion, and I think definitely my story includes really, really desiring that fashion and wanting to like move to Toronto to enter the fashion industry. And then later kind of seeing the holes in the fashion industry and kind of the curtain being lifted, and seeing the negative aspects of the industry, especially like fast fashion, and just starting to see like, okay, maybe it's not as glamorous as I thought it was, and maybe it's something that we actually need to work on and we need to change. And I think Indigenous designers are especially poised to be a part of that change because of those values that we have. I'm just curious though, for those who might not know, could you talk a little bit about Two-Spirit and what that means?
Yeah, so Two-Spirit, it's not like a sexual orientation. It's more of a gender identity, I guess you could say. So Two-Spirited people, what I was taught, I can't really speak on behalf of all Two-Spirit people, but I could speak on behalf of myself and what I was taught. But what I was taught was that Two-Spirit people, we carry two spirits within ourselves, both a feminine and a masculine spirit as well too. And because we carry these two spirits, we were able to walk in a lot of realms within our lives, within the spirit realm, within the dream realm, and provide these teachings and kind of be leaders and healers within our communities. A lot of two-spirited people were often seen as chiefs way back when, before colonization came. But because of colonization, all of those teachings were kind of stripped from our people, especially growing up where I grew up, where it was very highly Christianized. Being gay was looked at as being a sin, and that kind of played a role in how I grew up too as well. Like I grew up scared, I grew up bullied, like I grew up in a very difficult situation because of colonization. But as time went on and as the generations start becoming more aware of the colonization that happened on our people, the more that our people are turning back to our culture and learning about the teachings as well too. So from what I was learned, Two-Spirit people were very sacred people within Indigenous communities and held very powerful roles.
Beautiful. And so is it fair to say that you use fashion, I think you mentioned like as an escape, like it was your creative outlet, I think.
Exactly, yeah. So two-spirited people as well too, we didn't really believe in the whole gender norms as well too, and the whole, stigma that the mainstream fashion industry placed on women's wear, men's wear, and there's this whole movement now of gender neutral clothing brands coming up. But two-spirit people, we've never looked at clothing as just, this is women's wear, this is men's wear. We wore what we wanted to wear. We wanted to wear something that would represent us. We wore stuff that we felt a connection to, that we just wanted to feel beautiful in. And we didn't believe in the whole men's wear, women's wear. Indigenous people never believed in that. So with the work of my brand and me and Lesley's collaboration, I want to be able to provide more education about that and, let people become more aware of Indigenous cultures and how Indigenous fashion kind of influences mainstream fashion to this day.
That's so true that it might be seen of as kind of like a new thing in fashion, these gender neutral new brands that are coming out. Like it is definitely not a trend, since Indigenous peoples have been doing it since time immemorial, really. Brianna, I'm wondering, are you seeing kind of similar changes on the powwow trail? I know at Ryerson University, we were really adamant to invite MCs who use safer terminology. They're more respectful for all genders, even in the announcement of the dances. And we also invited, starting last year, a head two-spirit dancer in addition to a head male and a head female. We've been learning a lot. There was a session on Monday about the history of powwow. So we're learning a lot about how they came to be and how they're evolving. So are you seeing shifts in that gender binary in powwows?
I would say yes and no. I would say undercurrents of the teachings and the gifts that are brought by our two-spirit community haven't always been there within powwow. My first teacher, actually, who taught me how to dance was a two-spirit person who was a fancy shawl dancer. And they took me like everywhere. Like they took me all over. We traveled to all the powwows all over the province, all over the prairies. And I think they taught me, like, obviously about powwow, but they taught me a lot about what Scott had mentioned, the teachings, the gifts, the way that they were able to, just like the bravery that they brought to the space was so powerful. And so that's something that I always want to credit, is that even like, oh my gosh, that was 12 years ago that I learned how to dance, like that they started mentoring me. And there was never a thing, like there was never a conversation, there was never an issue as to them being, identifying as who they were, about wearing or representing the fancy shawl. It was just never something that was an issue. So I would say that has always existed within powwow, that there has always been that representation. I would agree with what Scott had said, is that there are some places and spaces within Indigenous country that have been more impacted, or I would say in many ways like suffocated by Christianity and a lot of those oppressive kind of values that came with that Western like male patriarchy. But I can say that like it has always been an undercurrent for me within the powwow circle, and that's something that I think is just so beautiful about our culture. I also grew up within the inner city of Edmonton, and like even within my friend groups, as young as like, my goodness, I'm thinking back, like 10 years old, like tons of my friends were two-spirit, and they were always just open about who they were and proud about who they were. So yeah, I would say that it's becoming more, because we're at a time where it's so critical that we address some of these Western male like values, like these patriarchal values, that we are seeing more platforms for people to speak up about. for, like leaders like Scott and leaders like other Two-Spirit folks within our community to speak up and address some of those conflicting values that don't fit within our culture. I would say that there's just more space for that to be to have a light shone on it, to have a spotlight for these beautiful leaders within our community. And that includes within the POW circles. So it's always been there, but I think there's just more light shone on that community now. And there's more space for leadership, and there's more space for, we've seen like Two-Spirit powwows like emerging within many places on Turtle Island, which is just so amazing. And I remember the first time that, and then there's space for us to explore our own, that side of ourselves, within my community. I was gifted like a grass dance regalia once. I got to dance grass, and I was just like, wow, this is so awesome. And I don't identify as Two-Spirit, but I am queer. And that's something that was like amazing. It was so liberating. And I was like, wow, this is beautiful. So spaces for us to just be free as well, to be who we are and to express and explore who we are. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Perfect sense. So those spaces are so important. And I think you touched on the spotlight and how having a spotlight or a platform is so important. And Lesley, you mentioned earlier just how many different kinds of messages I think you want to send with your brand. Why was that so important for you to not just be any fashion brand? Like, what are those messages that you were trying to send with your brand?
Yeah. So growing up, as many fashion designers do, fashion television was a go-to for me. And then always seeing very thin models and always one color of a skin tone. Growing up, not being that I'm a curvy girl, I have darker skin, or more tan skin. So I wanted to make a brand, make a space that I would fit into, because I've always been kind of not that fashion norm. So then I started my brand at 22 while I was still in school, still in fashion school. So all these ways to discover who I was and what I was becoming, I wanted to create the brand to be something that I could look up to as a like client, almost if they were two identities. So struggles with my mental health, struggles with my body image. I wanted to create safe spaces within the fashion industry that would not only just accept, but talk about those aspects. So we have had runway shows where we didn't cast the models based on their waist measurement, but we casted them based on their mental strength. So all the models identified with mental health, and to put that type of leader of someone who's living successfully, perhaps with mental illness, on a major stage like Toronto Women's Fashion Week, was really important to me to increase that representation. And then similarly, we casted an all Indigenous showcase for Toronto Fashion Week, and that was the first time that had happened in, I think, the last decade. So to put that representation on Indigenous people might look different. We all don't have even all brown eyes. So just down to like maybe that aspect, but of course we range so vastly across Turtle Island, and that changes our appearance. So I really wanted to show that we weren't just that Pocahontas style of appearance. So aspects like that I really want to push within the fashion industry and still continue to show how beautiful we all are.
I think it's so inspiring to young designers that because your collections are also just so beautiful. Like it's like any other fashion brand that has beautiful clothing. So it's so inspiring to show young designers, young Indigenous designers, that you can be a beautiful fashion brand, like all the other beautiful fashion brands, but you can also have a deeper meaning and a cause. I think one of the kind of bigger questions I was thinking about for this panel was what makes Indigenous fashion, Indigenous design special, and what makes it different from the mainstream industry. But I think we've actually hit on a lot of those different pieces. It's the blurring of genders. It's the representation of different body sizes on the runway. Is there anything else that any of you can kind of think of as like what makes Indigenous fashion different or special from the mainstream industry?
I would also say it's the kinship and the collaboration qualities. For Scott and I, it was just so natural of a transition to want to work together. And I think in non-Indigenous fashion circles, it's a bit harder to approach and get that correct feedback to be so open to share your brand with someone else. I find that exclusivity within fashion is something that collaborations like mine and Scott's are critiquing. And to work forward to build all of us up at the same time is really kind of what we're focusing on.
Yeah, to get a bit deep, it's like capitalism makes us, it individualizes us. And it's like everyone has to be, their own entrepreneur. And it's, the notion of the star designer, like the star fashion designer who makes it big and they're this creative genius and they move to Paris. Like that's a very Western European notion of fashion. And to an Indigenous community, it makes perfect sense that you're going to collaborate with your community. It's going to be like a family operation. It's not going to be this lone person in their atelier, designing. Brianna, did you have something too?
Yeah, two things. I would agree 100% with Lesley. So I'm a beadwork artist, and that was one thing, a value that I was given by all of my beadwork teachers. So Lillian Shirt was one of my teachers, as well as Diane Wood from Goodfish Lake First Nation, and two Cree women who taught me about the value of mentorship and sharing teachings when it comes to beadwork, or really anything when it comes to like Indigenous artistry, that you're teaching those beautiful values and lessons to the next generation, and you're not looking at your community as competition. And that's something that I have seen all across Turtle Island, and that is so phenomenal because we have now young artists that are coming up that are being mentored by older artists that are just like, there just is not even any room for competition, because we're really trying so hard to revitalize a culture that was taken from us. As well, the idea of quality, like the spirit that lives within our clothing and our works that we do, the value, like the intrinsic value that we hold in our garments and in our beadwork, in our like jewelry, all of these things that we wear and carry, I think it is in direct opposition to the fast fashion industry. So this whole idea that you can just go pick something up for like off a bargain rack and that you can wear it twice and then you could throw it away. Like that's something that we're in direct opposition to as Indigenous fashion designers. And that's something that I see with Lesley. Like I got engaged last week, and immediately the first person that I was like, oh my gosh, like I need something to wear to like a ceremony. And Lesley was one of the first people I asked, because I was like, I know that what they do is quality and beautiful, and it's something that I can keep forever. And so that's something that Lesley represents to me. And I feel like that's the same thing that Mary Regalia represents. This is something that I'm not only going to wear now throughout my entire life, it's something that I'm going to pass on to my children. It's something that they will pass on to their children, and creator willing, it'll last that long. But that is who we are as Indigenous people, and I think that we embody that, and that we have to continue to think about our fashion in that way, because we don't want to get sucked into this whole capitalistic, like you were saying, like capitalist mentality where it's just about like money, right? Quick, fast money. And that's not what it's about.
Yeah, and I'm seeing even in the way that we exchange our fashion as like outside of capitalism, like lots of like just trading and bartering and like I think beaters especially, like, oh, I'll beat you this piece, you give me this piece, and beating, it's such like a slow process that like you're not pumping out earrings, every hour. Like you're spending days or weeks. For me, it's months on like one piece of beadwork. I always liken Indigenous fashion to luxury fashion in that it's like made by the hand. It's really slow. It's long lasting. The quality is there. But it's luxury fashion, but a bit elevated too, because it has that spiritual aspect that you were speaking of. I think, you can see some of that aspect in, say, like if you have a tailor and the tailor, makes all of your suits and you have this like personal relationship with the tailor. I think that's kind of getting at that kinship that Indigenous fashion is, but it's still not at that same level where it's like completely mediated by the amount of money that you have. Like only rich people can afford that hand tailored garment. I think that's what at least I'm hoping for the future of Indigenous fashion is that we start, moving away from just only certain people can afford that high quality, and that luxury fashion is something that we actually all deserve. And it's our right to have beautiful, incredible garments and regalia like that. Scott, do you have any other thoughts on Indigenous fashion?
Yeah, so I completely agree with what Brianna and Lesley brought up, just the whole thing about Indigenous fashion. But also I noticed with Indigenous fashion, we are able to tell stories with our garments and with our collections too. And that's something that I feel like will definitely inspire the mainstream fashion industry as well too. Like what Brianna was mentioning, she knows exactly where all of her pieces were from and where they were harvested from as well, what families they came from. With Lesley's collections too, she's always sharing stories about mental health and body positivity and anything that she went through as well too. And I know with this collaboration, we wanted to tell a story with our jackets as well too, and embracing both the walks of life, how I walked in more the traditional side, and Lesley wasn't raised within the traditional life. But both of us were able to combine our knowledge and share our teachings with each other and come out with this beautiful collection. And, we wanted to tell the stories that our people have heard and just share the beautiful richness of Indigenous culture within our fashion. And, just let people know that our idea of like what you were saying, our idea of luxury fashion is something that was put love and time into. And the beadwork, there's always like one bead at a time, and we respect that and we honor that as well too. We know it's an artwork, we know it's a style, it's a way of living for us. And I know if we educate the mainstream fashion industry more about these qualities that Indigenous people hold within fashion and within the regalias and within any jewelry pieces that they have, that will definitely the mainstream fashion could get inspired by, I find.
Yeah, stories are so important. And I think in the mainstream industry, they often kind of make up stories. It's like you're thinking about, okay, what's this next collection about? Oh, I'm going to get inspiration from a safari, and I'm going to make up this story about safaris and glamour and use that inspiration for all my prints and the marketing. They're fabricating imaginary stories, but for Indigenous designers, it's our community stories. And in those stories are so many lessons and values and like metaphors, and there's just so much richness about like really how to live a good life is what we get from those stories. And those are the stories we bring to our fashion. So it's not stories to make you buy more or imaginary stories. It's like, it's our lessons and our values that are the stories that we bring. Do you want to talk a bit more, Scott, about this collection? What was it like, the process? And then do you want to mention the campaign images are going to be released pretty soon, if not already, for Education Week. But yeah, what was it like designing it? And then what did you want to accomplish with the photo shoot that you were on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as I started my studies here in Toronto, that's when I decided to I became more aware of Indigenous designers and Indigenous fashion as a whole. And one of the first designers actually I came across was Lesley Hampton. And I was obsessed. Like, I literally dropped to the floor, obsessed, was gagging over all of her designs, just because I've always had something for luxury fashion, high fashion, and that's something that Lesley represented. And when we collabed for our first jingle jacket, and we seen the amount of support from our people that we received across Turtle Island, I knew I wanted to branch out more into that. And for me, my favorite color is black, as you could probably tell. So we wanted to come out with more luxe items and more affordable items too for our people, for anybody to purchase. And we wanted to share our Indigenous teachings and our culture with the mainstream society. And, because I find that's how we kind of avoid the cultural appropriation and all of that. We, as Indigenous designers, we have a duty to kind of share our stories and share our history to the mainstream fashion industry. And that's something that Lesley has been doing successfully, and that's something I got inspired by. So working with Lesley definitely has been inspiring for me. And, we're always just bouncing ideas off of each other. And we've been talking about collabs for a while now, and then we decided this one would make much more sense for us to come out with. And yeah, it was beautiful. We went to a couple fabric meetings together. It was both a very collaborative effort within this brand. We sourced the materials together. We fell in love once Emily dropped her new style of jingles, and then that's when we got inspired and decided to come out with. Originally, we were only supposed to come out with 2 jackets, but then it turned to 3 jackets. It's just been a lot of work. It's been very fun, and we've just been learning from each other and learning from our mentors as well too. So we've just been working hard.
And how was the photo shoot for you?
The photo shoot was actually one of the biggest productions I've ever been involved with. It was a lot of work, but it was also so fun, just because we had an amazing team as well too. And luckily for me, the team was basically all of my friends and my peers and my mentors. So it was so comfortable and so fun, and just we created a lot of magic, and it was so beautiful just to learn from other people from within production, within design, and there are stories being told about Indigenous culture and everything. It was just absolutely beautiful. I honestly wouldn't change a thing.
Amazing. And so, Lesley, are the jackets going to be available? Are you launching them? Can people get them? Can non-Indigenous people wear them? I think those are a lot of questions people might be thinking about.
Yeah, so during the Education Week with Ryerson Powwow, you will be able to see the campaign images that we shot during our big production day. And then similar to Scott, it's the biggest production that I've been on before, working with a production company and all that collaboration efforts. So I'm really excited to see the final product and release it to everybody. So they will be available for pre-purchase initially, so that we can generate interest and really stay with the production levels, because they are all made by myself and Scott in our Toronto-based studio. So it's our hands making them. So with that, we can only make maybe 1 or 2 a week. So depending on the interest, we'll see how many we can blast out there. And we were talking, me and Scott, we want everybody to be able to wear this garment. It is inspired by the jingle dress and the healing aspects that the jingle dress brings, but it is more of a luxury item. So if you're Indigenous, non-Indigenous, as long as you bring those teachings around reconciliation in fashion and decolonizing fashion, and you bring that with you when you wear the work, and if people ask you about what you're wearing, you can share that story. That's really kind of what we want to provide with this piece, with people wearing this piece.
Amazing. Yeah, I always say that for non-Indigenous people who wear anything, beadwear, for example, is that it comes with a certain responsibility.
Exactly.
You should kind of wear it proudly. And yeah, if someone says like, oh, that's a beautiful pair of earrings, are you sure you should be wearing them? You're like, yes, I bought it from so-and-so at this powwow. They work with their community. They're a community leader. Like Indigenous people can't be the only people responsible for changing that narrative and sharing our culture. And we need non-Indigenous allies to help us change that narrative. Brianna, any thoughts about this collaboration?
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. I want a jacket. I'm gonna just put that out there. I'm gonna see, down the road, if I can get a hold of one and purchase one, I would love to wear it. I think that, you totally hit the nail on the head. Like the importance of, like, as Indigenous artists, we're always talking about authenticity, and like, we want people to buy authentic stuff. And there is nothing more authentic than an Indigenous made product. So like having that ethos and that ethic like out there in the world is really integral. And like I love seeing people rocking stuff that is actually made by our communities, not like something just fabricated, somewhere in a factory somewhere by somebody that we have no clue who made it. So this, I think, represents that ethic and that quality and that Indigenous made, like you actually know where it came from, that it came from Lesley and Scott, that they are two people that are working really hard in our community to create something quality. And like, I think the boundary for me is people wearing regalia, but this is not regalia. Like, this is very different. This is something that they put a lot of thought and effort into. So absolutely, I think that this is, they have done an excellent job at representing what we are trying to put forward, an idea that we are trying to put forward around Indigenous made products, the ethic behind it, and the importance of that in the world today.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can't buy regalia. Like that's the thing about it. It's like you can't go into a store and buy the whole component of regalia because it's made up of so many components and they take so long. You can buy elements to craft your regalia, but you can't. It's not a product. It comes from family. I also just think it's such a example of that resilience and that evolution and adaptation that we were talking about. I was even reflecting on the four of us talking on Zoom from all of our locations. It's like we're in a pandemic and we're going to adapt and we still need to move forward, and we're going to share our stories and be in relation with one another over Zoom. So I think it like perfectly epitomizes young Indigenous people today and how we're evolving with the times and we're moving forward and we're carrying our culture forward. I'll throw out this last question because we're running out of time. What do you hope for the future of fashion or Indigenous fashion? Who wants to go first?
I could go. So I'm hoping for more Indigenous representation, definitely more. We can never have too much. specifically more Indigenous Two-Spirit representation as well too. I know we have a lot of knowledge and a lot of gifts that we could share within the mainstream fashion, and I feel like a lot of the people within mainstream fashion industry have a lot to learn from Indigenous designers and the way Indigenous people look at fashion and clothes and how we hold our teachings and hold them close to us and how we look at luxury fashion.
Maybe I will go next so that Lesley can finish the final word. So I think that a lot of the work that I do is around environmental awareness about our relationship and our kinship to the land. So for me, a future for me includes, like really getting to the ethic of like fashion and garments and where we're sourcing our fabric and material from, more natural products, so like more cotton, more hemp, getting away from like the polyester, really like, how would you say it? Yeah, just like that whole, that stuff that will just light on fire if you just put a flame to it. It'll go up. That kind of stuff, a lot of issues with like, those fabrics in our water systems. So I guess just more awareness of where your materials are coming from. And again, like having people just be really conscious and aware about fast fashion and how we have to move away from that idea of just getting something so that you could just wear it really quickly and just throw it away. Like that idea of things like just being in fashion for like a few months and then you're just over it, right? Like things that are timeless, things that are quality, things that you can wear for a lifetime, things that you can pass on to your children. Those values and ethics being embodied within the industry. And I think that our communities are carrying those values forward in a beautiful way. So more of that.
For me, I would say a continued increase in storytelling within fashion. Indigenous brands and Indigenous creators do it so well. So to bridge that gap between Indigenous fashion and the mainstream fashion, and it just all becomes one, and Indigenous designs are accepted more into the mainstream, would be incredible. And then for those say non-Indigenous designers to look more into what their platform can say. As a brand, we have thousands of followers and all that stuff. We're given the platform like a stage at a fashion week or all this media. And I think with all that capacity for exposure, I think you really need to have the message there. And that message through storytelling is a great way to push that and really just have fashion be a forefront of an industry and push forward just for a better tomorrow.
That's amazing. I have so many more thoughts for all of those. I do really think that Indigenous fashion could be like an economic driver for our communities. Like every Indigenous community can have fashion designers and can have a supply chain. For non-Indigenous designers, what you just mentioned, Lesley, I think, look into your own cultures. Like where do you come from? And, just to say like, oh yeah, I'm a white designer. Well, like, no, you're not. You have a country and you have a heritage. Like, what are those stories in your culture? Like, that's what I want. I want deeper meaning for everyone, wherever you come from. And Brianna, I think you're so on the nose about environmentally sustainable fabrics. I'm so excited for the like hide tanning movement that's really bubbling across the country. Like, can we connect our hide tanners to our designers and just like really build out that supply chain so we know where it's all coming from and we're all connected And then to Scott, those representations, I think, are so important. And what I would say is that I would love to see more Indigenous youth excited about fashion coming to the School of Fashion. And that'll be the final word, I think. Chimigwich to the School of Fashion, who sponsored this conversation. I'm so fortunate to be part of a school that is really, I think, pushing the boundaries about fashion and our focus on inclusivity and sustainability and decolonization. I think is so important. So shout out to the School of Fashion, Dr. Van Berry, chair of that school. And thank you to all of you for this incredible conversation. I'm so grateful to have seen you through Zoom. Thanks for joining Powwow Education Week. Lesley, can you also put me at the top of that waiting list? I'm going to log on right now and pre-purchase my jacket.
We can put it for when this Zoom airs and the end of that Zoom, then that's when we'll have it live on the website.
Oh, amazing. So everyone watching this right now, log on to lesleyhampton.com?
Yes.
Okay.
It'll be right there, right on the cover.
Oh, amazing. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Bama P, till we meet again. Chimigwech.
Miigwech.
Miigwech.
Miigwech, thank you.
Hi, thanks. Miigwech.